Hi, Foxes. So, this week you guys are going to be writing a personal narrative that you turn into a comic book. The comic book part won't come until the week after. But I wanted to go over with you guys the elements of personal narratives just to remind you what they are. We've already written personal narratives, if you guys remember, and we made little books out of them. So that was a little while ago, so I just wanted to remind you guys of the things that we added to those personal narratives. So if you guys could grab this out of your packet if you don't have it already, we're going to read it and we're going to notate it together. So it's called Unexpected Guests. Wake up, sweetheart, wake up. I heard a voice whispering and my arm being gently nudged. I rubbed my eyes and squinted to help my eyes adjust. I could see my mom leaning over me in her pajamas. Now, right off the bat, I noticed that we have a hook. And the hook they chose was dialogue. So if you guys remember, dialogue is whenever someone is speaking. And this is a good example of how to punctuate dialogue. You've got the quotation marks at the end, and then you still keep up the same quotation within those, or the same punctuation within those quotation marks, just like you would in another sentence. Another thing I noticed in this first section, my arm, I heard a voice whispering and my arm being gently nudged. So gently nudged, I think that's kind of juicy, right? Instead of just saying pulled or pushed or whatever. So remember, when we write personal narratives, we use a lot of juicy language and figurative language and juicy words, and we want to make it just real juicy. So let's keep going. Mom, what is it? I whispered back. Shh. Follow me and come see, Mom answered. So again, we have dialogue between two of the characters. And if you notice, we've got a space here, a space here, and a space here. Because whenever someone new starts talking, we go down, right? Just like we would with a paragraph, we go down. So let's keep going. I watched Mom swiftly, there's a juicy word, swiftly walk through the cabin hallway and into the living room where the moon lit up the entire room. The wooden floor of the cabin was cold under my feet. Mom led the way to the big window where the moon was shining through, and she knelt down on the couch. I slowly knelt down on the couch next to her, and we leaned over the top looking out the window together. So what I noticed from this is that we've got a lot of description, right? So she's describing how her mom is walking, right? She's giving that little detail. They're going through the cabin hallway and into the living room where the moon lit up the entire room. There's a description. So what it looks like. The wooden floor of the cabin was cold under my feet. So she's describing another sense there. She's describing touch. So she's describing what it looks like, what it feels like. Mom led the way to the big window where the moon was shining through, and she knelt down on the couch. Then she's describing what's happening, right? But she's using those juicy words like knelt down instead of just saying like she sat down or... And then I slowly knelt down. So again, we're giving a descriptive word, an adjective, about how we're doing it or how something is happening, and that really fills our story with detail, and it makes it more fun to read. It draws your reader in when we have those kind of details because they can see what's happening a lot better. And when we can visualize what's happening, we are engaged in the story. And that's why we want to keep reading when we're engaged. So let's go down. Again, we have dialogue here. And if you notice, we have that space between this paragraph and the dialogue, and then we make another space. Do you see them? Isn't it something? She asked with amazement in her voice. We added with amazement in her voice, so we added how she asked, right? And again, that little detail, it seems really small. It's just a couple words, but now I can better imagine how her mom is saying something, how her mom is saying this or asking this. My eyes searched through the darkness, through the giant pine trees, and up the hillside out the window. It was very dark, but the stars glittered the sky, and the moon was nice and full. The stars glittered the sky. That's an example of figurative language, right? So she's adding in figurative language because she knows that, and you guys know too, figurative language makes our stories, again, juicier, and it makes it more interesting, and it brings us into the story, especially when we can see, when we compare these two things, we can see what's happening, and we can connect to that. It brings us into the story even more, and we're even more engaged. Suddenly, right off the bat, I see that transition, right? So we can start our paragraphs off with transitions if we want, or even add them in to our paragraphs. Suddenly, there they were. It was breathtaking. Breathtaking is super juicy, and she's telling us how she's reacting, right? A whole herd of elk were traveling up the hillside. Some were stopped, grazing on grass, and carefully searching for danger around them. Some smoothly led the way up the hill as they are searching for danger. Some smoothly led the way up the hill as the others trailed behind them. Their eyes reflected the light of the moon as they cautiously scanned the forest. There were so many of them, 10, maybe 15. They seemed so much larger in person than I'd seen in magazines. My mom and I sat frozen as statues as we observed their every move. Frozen as statues. That's more figurative language right there, right? And that's something that we can definitely connect with and imagine. Another thing I want to point out here is that we've got a lot of juicy language. So she really slowed this moment down, and she described a lot of what was happening and how it was happening. So a whole herd of elk were traveling up the hillside. She could have stopped there, right? But then she goes on to describe what they're doing and how they're doing it so that we can really see what's happening. Some were stopped, grazing on grass and carefully searching for danger around them. Some smoothly led the way up the hill as the others trailed behind them. Their eyes reflected the light of the moon as they cautiously scanned the forest. There were so many of them, 10, maybe 15. They seemed so much larger in person than I'd seen in magazines. My mom and I sat frozen as statues as we observed their every move. So she really slowed down this moment and gave us a lot of detail about what was happening. And, you know, if she had just stopped at a whole herd of elk were traveling up the hillside, you know, we wouldn't have gotten this full image of what she was seeing. Finally, there's another transition, right? Finally, the last one made its way up the grassy hill and disappeared through the trees. My heart sank a bit, and I felt sad to see them go. Here's what I'm noticing. She's adding in her feelings, right? So when we write personal narratives, we add in our thoughts and feelings. That makes the reader more connected to us and to our story. When they know what our thoughts and feelings are, I can relate to this, right? My heart sank a bit and I felt sad to see them go. That's an emotion that I can relate to. That's a feeling that I can relate to. So more and more as I read the story, I'm becoming more engaged, more interested. I'm connecting more to it. So that's a great element of personal narratives. I glanced up at Mom, still in awe. Still in awe. That's also kind of like a feeling or a thought that she's having. She grinned at me, and I laid my head on her shoulder. She put her arms around me and squeezed as I closed my eyes and smiled. I will never forget that night and that I heard her soft voice whisper, "Wake up, sweetheart, wake up." So, and what I notice here is she ended it with dialogue, which is kind of like a really good button to put on this story. And if you notice, the dialogue that she used here was the same dialogue that she used up here. So she kind of ended it by saying, you know, this all started with this statement from my mom, and that's how I'm gonna remember this. So if you guys remember, this part I don't want you guys to fill out with me. This part you're going to fill out with your own personal narrative, but I wanted to remind you. So we've got the watermelon slice, and the seed. So the watermelon is like big picture. So the watermelon of the story would be that she was spending time with her mom, right? Or an event she shared with her mom. The slice would be that they woke up and looked out at the night and saw some elk. But the seed is where we really slowed it down. Remember, she really slowed down the moment that she saw the elk and was describing everything about the elk and what they were doing and what they looked like and how it made her feel and what she was thinking and how it was beautiful and all that stuff. So the seed would be when her and her mom saw the elk moving and watched as they migrated down the hill. And when she talked about what that looked like, what that felt like, what that sounded like, you know, she really slowed that down. And so that's how I know that it's the seed, right? So for your own personal narrative, I want you to start here. Tell me what the watermelon of the story is, the big picture. Tell me what the slice is, and then what the seed is. And that's going to help you when you go to actually write your personal narrative. You're going to know where you want to spend most of your time. You're going to want to really slow down the seed moment, right? And the way that you can get there is by using the watermelon and the watermelon slice. So I'm excited to read these. Once you've written them, I want you to send them to me so that I can read them. I'm very excited, and we'll get started on the comic book part of it the next week. So, bye, foxes. Miss you.